So welcome to this segment as we try to look at revise, in this case the biology 2022 paper 1. If you are preparing for the exams, it will give you a good opportunity to actually revise quickly. So let's start right away with question number 1. Which of the following lists contains only non-living things in the environment? So remember, non-living things in the environment are what we sometimes call as being abiotic. So we call them as being abiotic factors. So from what we have there, what can you see that is abiotic? Well, snail, disqualifies it. We can talk about glass. There we can simply talk about again, snail disqualifies it. Worms and trees disqualified it. Therefore, the best option is D, sunlight, water, and soil, and non-living things. Remember, soil on its own is actually non-living, though it may contain some microorganism, but soil on its own is actually non-living. The second one says the diagram shows a light microscope. So this is a light microscope. Are you able to label some parts? Yes. A is what we call as being the coarse adjustment. That is the coarse adjustment knob. Let me try to see if I can use a pen, and that is the fine adjustment. That is the fine adjustment knob. Then that is representing the stage, and on top of the stage, then D is representing what we call the diaphragm. Then right on top of the diaphragm, that is called a condenser. Then this one here is the mirror. So those are part, and these are what we call as being the objective lenses. So these are objective lenses. Then somewhere here, this is where you have what we call the ocular lens, sometimes known as the eyepiece, the eyepiece lens. So you should be able to at least, even as you revise, you should be able to actually identify the parts, because in the next exam they may simply ask you, and that is representing what we call as being the body tube. So at least you know some ideas about that. The question says, which of the labeled parts shows the objective lenses? Now, which of the labeled part moves the objective lenses quickly up and down and brings it into focus the image under low power magnification? So of course the best option is actually A, the coarse adjustment knob. So that is what we call as being the coarse adjustment knob. So that's the one that actually helps to move up the objective lenses quickly up and down under low power magnification. The diagram shows an animal cell. This is an animal cell that we are calling as being the tail. And if you remember some components that are found, in a sperm, that is simply the tail, sometimes known as being the flagellum. If you write somewhere here, this is where you have, your spiral mitochondria, and there that represents the head of the sperm, which contains in front what we call an acrosome. So which of the following components of a cell is not found in the cell? Because this is an animal cell, then you don't expect to find the chloroplast. Hopefully we are together there. And if you look at the other question there, it says the diagram shows the activity of salivary amylase, pancreatic lipase, and stomach protease at different pH. So this is what they have told you. So these are enzymes that work in different parts of the alimentary canal. But according to the question now, the question there says, from the graph, what is the optimum or the best pH value for the enzyme protease? So now when it comes to the enzyme protease, if you look at the enzyme, protease, they are talking about the enzyme protease, the one that works in the stomach. Say the optimum, you simply go, to the highest point that you have there. So from the highest point you come down, the value gives you there is a 2. So that is the optimum. That is the optimum pH that you're having there, right? So that is basically what we can do there. So that is the best pH at which it can work. So each of these enzymes, if you look at them, they have got the best pH at which they can simply work. So you just go to the highest point and run down, then it will tell you. For example, this one approximately looks like 6 and the other one looks like 8. But for the one they wanted, stomach protease, it is simply 2.0. The table shows, you can just reduce it there. It says that the table shows food tests carried out to investigate the presence of reducing sugar in an apple fruit. So they're testing for reducing sugar. So what do we use for reducing sugar? We use actually Benedict solution test. And usually if reducing sugars are present, you should be able to see, orange color. So the solution will turn from blue to orange. So A was the best option, but it says which of the tests shows a positive result. So this is actually a positive result. So remember reducing sugars, but they'll ask you about it. What about when it comes to burette reagent? What do we use when you're using burette? What do you use when you're using burette? Of course, when you're testing for proteins, and if it's a positive result, it should give you purple color or violet if possible. That's what we mean there. Then of course when you're testing for starch, the positive we use what we call iodine, and the positive result is actually blue black is what you're supposed to have. Let's go to 6 there. It says which of the following is a disorder resulting from lack of proteins in a diet of a child. So in a diet of a child, which one? Proteins, you need to remember PK, lack of proteins leads to what we call as being kwashiorkor. Then you also need to remember MC, lack of carbohydrates leads to a condition called marasmus. That's what we know. What about if I lack vitamin D? A person may suffer from rickets. Vitamin D and sometimes calcium may result in rickets. What about if in terms of vitamin C, scurvy? What about in terms of iron? A person can suffer from anemia. So you need to know some of these components. There are 7. Let's move on to 7. It says a pregnant woman was advised at the hospital to eat food containing adequate amount of iron. What is the importance of iron in the diet of a pregnant woman? I was just from talking about there. It helps in the formation of hemoglobin for the fetus. Remember, the red blood cells contain a red pigment called hemoglobin, and for this hemoglobin to be formed, it simply means that iron is actually needed. 8. What are the functions of magnesium and nitrogen ions in plant? So for magnesium, it actually helps in the formation of chlorophyll, and nitrogen ions will help in the formation of amino acids. So would have actually gone for B there. Then it says the following is the dental formula of a dog. So remember, the dental formula is a formula that shows the number of teeth in one half of your mouth. That's what we mean. So this is just in one half. So for example, if you added all of them on top and at the bottom, if you wanted to know what's the total number of teeth in a dog, then you should have added this plus that is 6, 7, 8 plus again 8, that is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So you'd have multiplied the whole of this by 2. So 2 times 21, and that will give you 41 teeth. That would have been the total number of teeth if they ask you to find the total number of teeth in a dog. But now the question here says how many premolars are there in the mouth of a dog. So you go to premolar. Remember, that is in scissors, canine, premolars, and molars. So add the total number. There are 8 for the premolars altogether. On top and the bottom there are 8. So 8 you multiply it by 2, which will give you 16. So 16 was the best option there. And hopefully we are together. Now if you look at again, what we are having here, if you look at again what we're having there, number 10, it says the diagram illustrates the movement of a bolus of food through the esophagus. So you can see the process that is happening. This process is referred to, we call it as being peristalsis. So this is what we call as being peristalsis, the rhythmic wave-like movement because of the contraction and relaxation of the walls around the esophagus. Then it says, which of the following is not an effect of an ailment of the liver? So when the liver has a problem, which one is not an effect? Well, when I talk about high blood sugar level, yes, if at all the liver is affected, meaning the glucose level will not be reduced. Is that okay? Then maybe poor bowel formation because the liver helps in the formation of bowel. Okay, low blood pressure. Yeah, that may actually result, but if you look at this one, the two of them, there's one which is an option, low toxin levels in the blood. You cannot have low toxin levels in the blood if the liver has a problem. The toxin should be very high. If they said high, it would have actually qualified. But this one comes about, when the liver is really, damaged, then it will come about. So basically I would go for C. Which of the following occurs during inhalation in fish? So when a fish is actually breathing in, what does it do? Well, it lowers the mouth. That's one thing. So it lowers the mouth. So the mouth is not raised, the flow of the mouth is lowered. So these are the two options we are looking at. But what happens to perculum? They are closed, both of them. But what happens to the pressure? Inside, the pressure is actually reduced. So A is actually the very best option you would have actually gone for. Right? Then it says the following apparatus was set up to investigate one of the products of respiration. So you can see what they have done. Sodium hydroxide solution removes any carbon dioxide that is there. Now, if you notice, there's lime water in flask X and lime water in flask Y. But there was a black paper to prevent, whatever product are produced from respiration interfering with that. So now if you look at it this way, if you look at the tube is very short, so it's not bubbling through the lime water here. But this side, it is inserted right in the lime water, meaning whatever gas is produced will bubble through here. So if indeed respiration we know produces carbon dioxide, that carbon dioxide will turn this water milky, but here it will not turn milky. So let's look at there. What would happen to the lime water in flask X and Y when the pump is switched on? So when the pump is actually switched on, it simply means that in X it will stay clear, but in Y it actually becomes cloudy. So that is what is going to happen. I hope you are able to pick up something from there. 14, it says, which of the following are symptoms of a disease? So when it comes to symptoms, probably you are able to, there are signs and what they are calling as being symptoms. Symptoms are, things that you are able to detect. They are visible in this case. Yeah, signs, maybe a person will just be telling you, but it says symptoms of a disease. Probably would have gone diarrhea, vomiting, and high body temperature there. Body weight loss, no, but I think C is actually the best option if you look at them. So symptoms, they are clearly visible, so you can actually feel them, you can actually see them. The diagram shows 15. The diagram shows cross section of a stem and root of a plant. So if you look at this, what type of a plant is this? This is a dicot. This is actually a dicot root, and that is actually the structure of a dicot stem. So X is a dicot stem and Y is a dicot root. So A was the best option. Look at 16 there. It says the diagram shows some components of blood. Yeah, so these are components of blood. probably if you look at this one, this looks like a red blood cell. This is a type of white blood cells that we call the phagocyte, that's Q, and this is a type of white blood cell that we call as being the lymphocytes. So the phagocyte carry out engulfing of bacteria, phagocytosis. So it says P, the red blood cells actually transport oxygen. The phagocytes engulf, bacteria or, pathogens. Then that one produces antibodies to neutralize any poisons that we have. So not clotting, so that one is disqualified. So C should have actually been the best, option there. And if you look at what we have there, it says which of the following is the function of the lymph nodes. So the lymph nodes, it's a defense mechanism. It's in the lymphatic system. So we can simply say, actually it helps to prevent disease. It actually helps to prevent diseases. That's what you need to remember there. Yeah, because it's a defense system that we have in the body. The diagram shows the structure of a kidney tubule. If you look at that one, that is probably the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule. And inside of it, there's a glomerulus. And if you look at Z, that is the convoluted tubule, the Fordings, and that is the tubule that we're having leading to the loop of Henle. Which of these correctly identifies where ultrafiltration, reabsorption, and osmoregulation take place? So in X, this is where you are going to find ultrafiltration takes place. So I'm looking at the 2. Then Z, in the convoluted tubule, that's why you expect the reabsorption to take place. And Y, that's why you expect, in this case, osmoregulation to take place. Though it would have actually been good if they had actually labeled Y, as the loop. In this case, when if they labeled the loop of Henle, because that is where specifically it takes place. So I would basically go for B there as the right option. All right. Then if you notice there, this is the structure of the skin. It says the diagram shows the human skin. So you should be able to identify parts that make up the human skin. So this is the sweat gland O. This is the erector pili muscle. So this is called the erector, pili muscle that raises the hair up or down. Then these are blood vessels that we're having there, M, and O is representing the sweat gland. If you remember, there are sensory neurons that you have there and all sorts of things. What happens to the part labeled MNO on a cold day in order to regulate, body temperature? So what happens on a cold day? On a cold day, the blood vessels become smaller. So they constrict, as we call it, becoming smaller. Then what happens to N? It actually contracts, pulling the air upright so that it can trap a layer of air close to the surface of skin for insulation. Then O does not produce sweat. So it starts producing sweat because it's on a cold what? On a cold day. A would have actually been the best option there. Then if you look at 20, it says the diagram shows glands of the endocrine system. So these are glands of the endocrine system that are there. It says what is the name and function of the hormone produced by the structure labeled Z. So this is actually the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland produces what we call a hormone called thyroxine. In the brain, there's an endocrine called the pituitary gland, which is also called the master gland. On top of the kidney, you have what we call as being the adrenal gland that produce a hormone called adrenaline. Then here, close to the stomach, that is what we call as being the pancreas that produces hormones such as insulin and glucagon. Then here, these are representing what we call the gonads. There may be ovaries like on top here. These are the ovaries. Then here at the bottom, these are testes or testicles. That's what we mean. So you should be able to identify such. Now it says, what is the name and function of the hormone produced by the structure labeled W? So the hormone produced by W is thyroxine. Yeah, so it regulates metabolic rate of the body. It's like an accelerator in a vehicle. When you press too much, it will accelerate. So D is actually the best option there. 21 says the diagram shows a section of the human brain. Are you able to label this structure? Yes. If you look at it, you are going to find this is a big part with a small name. That's what I love to remember it. That is the cerebrum. That's where memory, intelligence, thinking is going to be happening there. Then here D is representing the pituitary gland. And if you look at, C, that is the medulla oblongata. Yeah, that is able to control things like, things like heart rates, blinking, and so on and so forth. And this one is for balance and coordination, cerebellum. So that is the cerebellum. Which of the labeled parts is responsible for reasoning? So it's actually that one. So reasoning, thinking, memory, all that happens in that region. Deafness can best be prevented by cleaning ears regularly with hard material. No. Cleaning ears regularly with soft material. Okay. Listening to loud music. No. Listening to soft music regularly. No. But cleaning ears regularly with soft, you can actually clean them with soft materials. It's actually a good practice to prevent that from happening. Okay, so if you look at 23, it says, which of the following correctly compares a ball and socket joint and the hinge joint? So remember, a ball and socket rotates in any direction, allows movement, in other words, in all plane. But a hinge allows movement, only in one plane. Yeah, so that one, no doubt, was actually the best option there. When light is switched on in a dark room where there are cockroaches, the cockroaches move away from the light and quickly hide in dark places. This is an example of, that's what we call, when it involves invertebrates, it's a taxism. So it's negative phototaxic, as we call it, because the cockroaches are running away from light. All right, let's go to 25. The diagram shows a longitudinal section through a monocot. What? Through a monocot seed. Are you able to identify in a monocot? Well, this one likely would have actually been representing what we call as being the radicle, which develops into a root, and that would have actually represented the promule, which later on develops into a shoot. That one develops into a root, like I said. Then this is the cotyledon, and that is representing the endosperm. And those with an endosperm are simply called endospermic seeds. So which of the labeled parts is not present in a dicot? Means it is actually the endosperm. Yeah. Then the diagram shows stages of sexual reproduction in an yeast cell. What type of a sexual reproduction is illustrated in the diagram? So from what you see, it has resulted in something started to develop. That is what we simply call as being budding. So we simply call it as being budding there. Then which of these plant parts can be used during vegetative production? A fruit, leaf bud, ovary, seed. It is actually a leaf bud. The diagram shows a longitudinal section of a leaf. Then it says which parts will continue growing after fertilization has taken place. No doubt about it, the part that will continue are the ovules. Yeah, so we can actually try to label some of those parts that are there. So A is representing the anther, though they didn't label it, that is the filament, so you should be able to label those. Those are representing the sepals, and that is representing the ovary, and that is the ovule. That's what we mean. So the part labeled 3 and 4 will continue to do that. So very important.